Welcome to the Premier Mindset by Premier Performance LLC. I'm your host, Trent Mailer, LCSW, clinical therapist and performance coach, and this is episode 32. Most people think excellence is about getting everything right. Flawless execution, zero mistakes, total control. But that's not excellence. That's perfectionism. And perfectionism doesn't drive success, it quietly destroys it. Perfectionism shows up every time you chase results that just feel out of reach. When you redo work that was already good enough, when you hesitate to share an idea because it's not perfect yet, or when you can't celebrate a win because you already see the next flaw. High achievers fall into this trap more than anyone, and it kills momentum. Today, we're breaking down the real difference between perfectionism and excellence, how one limits your potential and the other unlocks it. You'll learn how to shift from fear-driven performance to mastery-driven growth, and how to actually enjoy your success instead of constantly chasing the next fix. Quick note before we dive in, this podcast is for education and performance growth. It's not a replacement for therapy or medical treatment. If there is something you need, make sure you go get it. This will not replace that. This is just for spreading awareness and helping you guys get started on your journey, but we need to get what we need. You can also watch full episodes on YouTube and Spotify, and we have the audio-only version on Apple Podcasts as well. I'll also be sharing clips across Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and X, so hit subscribe or follow us to catch every drop of new content. All the links are in the show notes, and we have new content coming out every day and new episodes dropping every week. If you've ever felt like your own standards are suffocating your progress, this episode is for you. Now let's get into it. What is perfectionism? Perfectionism is a personality trait defined by the setting of unrealistically high standards and demanding flawlessness from oneself and for others, often leading to a critical self-evaluation when those standards aren't met. While it can involve a drive for excellence, it often manifests as an unhealthy obsession with being perfect, a deep fear of failure, and a belief that one's personal worth depends on achieving impossible goals. What is excellence? Excellence is the relentless pursuit of your personal best through consistent effort, continuous improvement, and dedication to mastering your skills rather than just winning or reaching a single peak. It involves a commitment to setting high personal standards, challenging yourself, and fostering the mental and physical resilience to overcome setbacks, ultimately striving to be better than you were yesterday. The difference between perfectionism and excellence. Perfectionism is fear-driven and focuses on flawless outcomes, which leads to anxiety and procrastination. While excellence is a growth-oriented pursuit of high standards, embracing mistakes as learning opportunities and finding joy in the process. Excellence leads to well-being and success, whereas perfectionism results in stress and self-doubt due to unattainable goals and a reliance on external validation. There is motivational energy behind each. One is fear-based and the other is purpose-based. The fear-based and purpose-based striving are two distinct sources of motivation that drive action through fundamentally different emotional energies. Fear-based motivation originates from a desire to avoid a negative outcome, while purpose-based motivation stems from the will to achieve a meaningful and positive vision. Fear-based striving, with this, the energy is driven by the instinct to avoid negative consequences or threats, engaging the body's fight or flight system, that threat response that we talked about in that first episode. The source usually comes from external pressures, threats, or the potential for loss. This could be anything from the fear of public failure, disappointing others, or losing a job. Our focus is typically averted, reactive, or even narrow. Fear can spur intense short-term effort, but often results in anxiety and stress over time, which makes it really hard sustainable-wise. It is usually unsustainable in the long run. A constant state of high alert leads to burnout, mental exhaustion, and inhibited creativity. We could do it for a time, but living in that all the time doesn't really lead to anything good. Typically, the outcomes that can happen can drive short-term action to get a task done, but it often leads to lower quality of work as the goal is simply to avoid punishment rather than to excel. It's that fear-based. We're trying to avoid something instead of trying to reach our high potential. And the psychological effect of it is that chronic fear triggers a stress response that diverts mental resources, hindering complex decision-making and innovation, taking away from your performance, taking away from what you can do. On the other hand, with purpose-based striving, this energy is rooted in a person's core values and provides a sense of direction and meaning, inspiring proactive and sustained action. It usually comes from the source of an internal desire to contribute to something bigger than oneself, whether to a cause, a community, or a personal ideal. Usually, our focus is aligned, expansive, or proactive. When driven by purpose, people are naturally more engaged and committed to goals that align with their values. We feel more passionate, and that usually leads to more sustainability because it's usually highly sustainable through this mindset, through that purpose based striving, which builds emotional resilience and provides a sense of fulfillment that outlasts temporary obstacles. This usually leads to an outcome that promotes creativity and innovation because it fosters a growth mindset and allows for risk taking without debilitating fear of failure. And on top of all that, the psychological effect of purpose based striving is that individuals with a strong sense of purpose tend to be happier, more resilient, and experience lower levels of stress and anxiety, which is again going to help our performance in what we're doing. Now let's talk about how perfectionism looks productive but slowly actually erodes performance. Perfectionism often masks deep-seated fears with a veneer of high standards and hard work, which can initially appear as extreme conscientiousness and dedication. However, this relentless and often anxiety-fueled pursuit of flawlessness ultimately erodes performance through a variety of self-sabotaging behaviors. The cycle of perfectionism and eroding performance. The appearance of being productive. A perfectionist may initially seem like a high performer because they are meticulously detailed and unwilling to compromise on quality. They might work longer hours and redo work to ensure it's perfect, which is often mistaken for commitment and strong work ethic. The reality of procrastination and inaction. Beneath the surface, the fear of not meeting impossibly high standards leads to procrastination and an inability to start or finish tasks. This analysis paralysis happens because the perceived threat of failure is so overwhelming that action or inaction becomes a safer alternative to producing an imperfect result. So we'd rather not do it than see what the answer would be. And I see this all the time with students, where I have students finishing homework or completing homework and they don't turn it in because the issue isn't doing the homework. The issue is being graded on it. Sometimes we don't take action on things because it feels safer than producing an imperfect result. Overemphasis on minor details. Perfectionists often focus excessive time and energy on minor details that have a diminishing return on quality. They are unable to discern when a task is good enough, leading to significant delays and squandered resources as we're trying to perfect things instead of getting it out. Stifled innovation and risk-taking. A drive for flawless results is fundamentally at odds with innovation, which requires experimentation, risk-taking, and learning from mistakes. For a perfectionist, the fear of making an error can lead to an avoidance of new or challenging progress and projects, which stagnates both personal and organizational growth. Burnout and decreased engagement. The intense, unending pressure to be flawless and avoid mistakes is emotionally and mentally exhausting. This constant stress and self-criticism ultimately leads to burnout, low morale, and a cynical detachment from work that was once a source of pride. Eroding relationships and teamwork. Perfectionists often believe they're the only ones who can do a task correctly. This leads to an inability to delegate effectively. This can cause resentment among team members and an overwhelming overload of work for the perfectionist, further diminishing their overall performance and well-being. We can't do it all by ourselves. We have to trust others, as difficult as that might be. The paradox. Perfectionism feels like control, but it's actually avoidance of vulnerability. The apparent sense of control that perfectionism offers is a compelling yet deceptive illusion. In reality, it is a psychological defense mechanism used to avoid deep fear of being vulnerable to criticism, shame, and judgment. The paradox is that in the attempt to control every detail to prevent imperfection, one ends up being controlled by fear itself. Perfectionism as an illusion of control. On the surface, a perfectionist's behavior seems to indicate a high degree of control over their work and environment. This can include micromanaging, which is overseeing every minute aspect of a task, whether their own or someone else's, excessive preparation, over-researching and over-planning to the point of analysis paralysis, which delays or inhibits action altogether, imposing rigid standards, holding themselves and others to impossibly high benchmarks for performance, compulsive organization, striving for order and clarity in an attempt to manage an inherently chaotic and unpredictable world. This drive for flawless execution feels safe because it creates a predictable world where mistakes are avoided. The perfectionist believes that if everything is perfect, then they cannot be criticized, judged, or blamed. While a perfectionist is trying to control the external world, the real struggle is an internal one. The true motivation is to avoid terrifying feelings of being vulnerable. This is because at the core of perfectionism lies the shame-based fear of being exposed as not good enough. Author and researcher Brené Brown describes perfectionism as a 20-ton shield that people carry around, believing it will protect them from being hurt. However, it is the very thing that prevents them from being seen for who they really are. The act of avoiding vulnerability manifests in several ways. The fear of being found out. A perfectionist often struggles with imposter syndrome, fearing that their flaws will be exposed and that they will be rejected by others. Emotional isolation. Perfectionists often struggle to share their true fears, insecurities, and disappointments with others, even those they are closest to. Procrastination. This is a key tell of the avoidance. The anxiety of producing an imperfect result can be so paralyzing that it is easier to postpone a task indefinitely than to risk failure. Refusal to delegate, like we talked about. The reluctance to let go of a task comes from a distrust of others and the need to control the outcome rather than from a genuine belief in one's own indispensable skills. The performance versus outcome mindset, focusing on controllable effort versus uncontrollable results. A performance versus outcome mindset is a psychological framework that distinguishes between two different focal points for motivation and evaluation. It contrasts the focus on controllable actions and effort, which is performance, with the focus on uncontrollable or external results, which is the outcome. Adopting a performance mindset is often seen as a more effective way to achieve long-term success and emotional resilience. While an outcome mindset can provide short-term motivation, it is often fragile and can lead to emotional distress. A performance mindset, on the other hand, provides a more stable foundation. By consistently executing high-quality performance, the likelihood of achieving positive outcomes increases naturally over time without the emotional volatility associated with being solely focused on the result. Diving into the inner head, the perfectionist's internal dialogue is, if it's not perfect, it's worthless. This is a core cognitive distortion known as all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking. This rigid thought pattern is both the engine and prison of perfectionism, fueling an exhausting and often self-sabotaging cycle. The cycle of worthlessness. This absolute statement sets up an impossible trap for the perfectionist, linking their entire self-worth to a flawless outcome. Because true perfection is unattainable, this line of reasoning guarantees that the perfectionist will always see themselves and their efforts as worthless. The cycle unfolds in several stages. The first is setting impossible standards. The perfectionist begins a task with unrealistically high goals, believing anything less is a total failure. The next step is focusing on flaws. As they work, their inner critic obsessively scans for flaws, focusing on tiny imperfections while ignoring overall success. And this leads to magnifying mistakes. Any perceived error, no matter how small, is magnified and used as proof of worthlessness, triggering feelings of shame and inadequacy, further leading to discounting success. The perfectionist discounts their genuine accomplishments, believing that if they had to work hard for them, they are a fraud. If they didn't, they are a fluke, which leads to a perpetuating cycle. This feeling of worthlessness and the fear of repeated experience lead to classic perfectionist behaviors like procrastination, overworking, and avoiding new challenges altogether. The dopamine trap, chasing temporary validation from flawless outcomes. The dopamine trap describes how perfectionists can become addicted to the fleeting surge of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which is released upon achieving a flawless outcome or receiving external validation. This cycle, where the pursuit of perfection is driven by the desire for a temporary high rather than true fulfillment, is a key reason perfectionism is a self-sabotaging and unsustainable cycle. The neurochemical cycle of perfectionism. Let's dive into the brain. The lure of anticipation. Dopamine is not primarily the chemical of pleasure, but of anticipation. When a perfectionist envisions a perfect outcome, their brain releases a burst of dopamine. This creates a powerful desire to work toward the goal, but it can also make starting difficult because the perfectionist compares the ideal vision to the messy reality of the first step. The fear of disappointment can lead to the procrastination we've been talking about. The hollow reward of validation. When the perfect outcome is achieved and receives praise, the brain is rewarded with a spike in dopamine. This praise can be an award, a promotion, a compliment, or even social media likes. This positive feedback momentarily soothes the perfectionist's deep-seated fear of inadequacy, creating a powerful and addictive loop. The fleeting high and craving for more. Like any addiction, the dopamine rush from validation is temporary. When it fades, the underlying anxiety returns, and the perfectionist is left craving another hit. This leads to an escalating cycle of needing to achieve an even better or more flawless result to get the same satisfying reward. The long-term emotional and physical toll. Constantly seeking validation for flawless outcomes trains the brain to rely on external approval for a sense of self-worth. This makes one's self-worth a moving target dependent on other people's opinions, and in the long run, this depletes motivation, increases anxiety and self-doubt, and can lead to burnout, poor mental health, and emotional vulnerability. So we want to break that dopamine trap. To escape this cycle, the focus must shift from chasing external validation to building internal motivation and self-worth. We can do that by focusing on the process, not just the outcome. By breaking larger goals into smaller, manageable steps, you can create a series of micro wins that release dopamine and build momentum in a healthy, sustainable way. We can also practice self-validation. Learn to recognize your own worth and progress without needing outside approval. This involves consciously acknowledging effort and celebrating small milestones along the way. Reconnect with your purpose. Grounding goals in your personal values and a sense of purpose provides a more sustainable, long-term source of fulfillment than a temporary validation rush. And also embrace imperfections. Consciously setting out to produce a bad first draft can be a helpful practice. By taking the pressure off and giving yourself permission to be imperfect, you make the task less daunting and you can move forward with less fear of failure. The neuroscience of mastery. Repetition, feedback, and dopamine reinforcement in learning. The neuroscience of mastery involves a dynamic interplay between brain regions, neurotransmitters, and neuroplasticity, orchestrated by repetition, feedback, and dopamine-fueled reinforcement. Unlike the short-term anxiety-driven goals of perfectionism, mastery relies on a sustainable neurobiological process of habit formation and learning. The neural orchestra of learning. All of this is working together, and we have to be aware of that, which is why repetition and automation can help so much. The more we do things, the easier it is. Repeated practice of a skill, whether cognitive or motor, shifts control from conscious, effortful processing to an unconscious, automated process. The basal ganglia, this is a deep brain structure which is crucial for habit formation and the execution of procedural memory, the knowing how of a skill. With repetition, the basal ganglia streamline the neural pathways involved in a task, making the action feel like second nature, kind of that muscle memory that we have talked about so often in the past or in sports. With the cerebellum is essential for coordinating motor movements, balance, and error correction. With every repetition, it refines and fine-tunes motor skills, ensuring they become more precise and efficient. So the cerebellum is kind of coming in to make sure to dial in the accuracy or the efficiency of whatever we're building in, whatever new behavior we're trying to add in. Myelination is repetition promotes the growth of myelin, a fatty substance that insulates neural pathways. Myelination increases the speed and efficiency of neural signals, reducing the mental effort needed to perform the skill. Feedback and error correction. Feedback is the essential mechanism that allows the brain to adjust and refine its motor and cognitive models of a task. Prediction error. When the actual outcome of an action differs from what the brain predicted, it creates a prediction error. This error signals a powerful learning tool, prompting the brain to update its internal models and adjust future actions. We actually need to make errors to learn. Cerebellar loops. The cerebellum compares the intended movement with the actual movement, using this comparison to send corrective signals back to the motor cortex. This feedback loop is essential for fine-tuning skills. And then the dopamine reinforcement. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter of motivation, learning, and reinforcement, and in the context of mastery, it acts as a crucial learning signal, not a pleasure reward. The reward prediction error. Dopamine neurons fire not in response to pleasure, but to the surprise of a better than expected outcome. This reward prediction error is a learning signal that tells the brain, repeat what you just did, do it again. Sustained engagement. Dopamine's role in the encoding the value of effort and motivating goal-directed planning is essential for long-term sustained practice required for mastery. It keeps the learner engaged and focused on refining their craft over time rather than just chasing a single flawless outcome. And we have to keep doing this over and over if we want it to be sustainable. The pursuit of novelty. New skills and novel experiences also trigger a rush of dopamine, which makes learning feel exciting and encourages repetition. This helps explain why the journey of mastery can be intrinsically rewarding, and we can feel that reward as we're going through the process. It doesn't have to be just at the outcome. For the perfectionist, a flawless outcome offers a temporary dopamine hit, quickly followed by anxiety over the next challenge and another fear. The dopamine trap of seeking external validation creates an unsustainable cycle. In contrast, the pursuit of mastery through repetition and feedback creates a more stable, resilient neurochemical feedback loop. The brain is rewarded not for a single perfect performance, but for the consistent, incremental progress that leads to deep-rooted skill and durable satisfaction of true expertise. Now let's talk a little bit about CBT and how we can use CBT in this. The good enough principle from CBT is about replacing unattainable standards with functional ones. The good enough principle is a core component of CBT, which stands for cognitive behavioral therapy for managing perfectionism. It involves replacing rigid, unattainable standards with more flexible, functional, and realistic goals. The principle does not promote carelessness, but rather a healthier, more sustainable approach to excellence. By embracing good enough, individuals can break the cycle of anxiety, procrastination, and self-criticism that perfectionism creates. Cognitive distortions linked to perfectionism, the all-or-nothing thinking, catastrophizing, and overgeneralization, which we've talked about a little bit before, these rational thought patterns prevent a person from seeing the nuances of a situation and instead drive them toward a rigid, fear-based pursuit of a flawless ideal. By becoming aware of these cognitive distortions and challenging their irrationality, individuals can begin to dismantle the unproductive and harmful cycle of perfectionism. And this is some of the work that we do at Premier Performance. We use CBT along with DBT and EMDR to really help people pass these things and get out of these mindsets that are keeping people trapped and running into failures and running into issues. We want to help free you guys so you can go be successful and lead the life you want to lead. How perfectionism fuels procrastination and paralysis. I can't start until it's perfect. Perfectionism fuels procrastination and paralysis by creating an impossible standard that makes starting or finishing a task feel daunting and overwhelming. The statement, I can't start until it's perfect, perfectly encapsulates the cognitive trap that prevents action. This mindset creates a self-reinforcing cycle of anxiety, avoidance, and inaction, ultimately leading to stalled projects and missed opportunities. This can lead to a threat system freeze response. Like we talked about in that first episode, that threat system has a fight or flight system that comes out in response to threat to help us deal with it. And one of those responses is to freeze. It's to do nothing. So inaction does happen as a response to threat. And some of this is about conquering that threat, but some of it is about reducing the feeling of threat so it doesn't activate that system. Because once we're in that system, a lot of these strategies we're talking about kind of turn off and we have to get through it or maybe use a skill to get out of it. Maybe not preparing for a meeting can be an example of kind of freezing. If you have a meeting coming up and you know there's something you got to do and you got to look into, and if you don't, it gives you a way out. It gives you something you can point at. That I didn't do that thing, yeah, but that's why I failed. Not because I'm not good enough, it's because I didn't prepare. We naturally give ourselves these outs all of the time because we don't like holding up our own ego against the success of how something went or not. And when we go through failure, we don't like taking it on and feeling like we just failed at something. We want to give ourselves something to blame. And you see this in our lives all the time. When something goes wrong, the first initial reaction we have is to blame someone else. Like hitting a red light. How many times have you guys been driving and then you hit a red light and thought about how the car in front of you is the reason you hit the red light? And if they just went faster, or if they just hit the yellow light, that you would have been okay and you would have gotten through it yourself. We love to blame others because it takes the responsibility off ourselves. And we sometimes got to face that responsibility and deal with it, but we also got to understand how our body's going to deal with it when it does come about. Because if we're freezing or if we avoid it, that could lead to more problems as well. So let's try and embrace these things. Let's try and face these things. There's a link between perfectionism and burnout. Endless standards without self-recognition are not sustainable. Perfectionism is a primary driver of burnout because it creates a cycle of endless, unattainable standards while simultaneously blocking self-recognition. This combination ensures that the perfectionist is in a constant state of striving without ever experiencing the emotional reward of satisfaction or a sense of enough. The cycle of perfectionism and burnout. With unrealistic expectations, a perfectionist sets standards so high that they are impossible to meet. This goal is not simply to do a good job, but to produce a flawless, definitive piece of work. This creates a foundation of chronic, unrelenting stress, which tends to lead to overworking and exhaustion. To even approach these impossible standards, the perfectionist works longer and harder than is healthy or necessary, sacrificing rest, relationships, and self-care. This prolonged overwork, fueled by anxiety and fear of failure, is a key ingredient for burnout. Harsh self-criticism. When the inevitable minor flaws or missteps occur, the perfectionist's inner dialogue becomes harshly critical, triggering feelings of shame and inadequacy, and this constant self-judgment creates emotional exhaustion, a defining feature of burnout, which also attributes to no self-recognition. A perfectionist refuses to acknowledge or celebrate their accomplishments, no matter how substantial. Because the outcome is never perfect, it is viewed as worthless, or the effort is downplayed with thoughts like anyone could have done that. The lack of self-recognition ensures the emotional tank is always empty and there's no sense of closure or satisfaction. And there's an emotional cost to all of this. Chronic tension, fear of being found out, imposter syndrome. Perfectionism is a breeding ground for significant emotional costs. The relentless pursuit of a flawless ideal coupled with harsh self-criticism creates an internal state of anxiety and doubt that erodes mental and emotional well-being over time. Elite performers focus on process over perfection. Daily reps lead to mastery. Elite performers achieve mastery not by being perfect, but by meticulously focusing on the process and the daily repetition of fundamentals. This approach shifts their attention from anxiety-inducing and uncontrollable outcomes to the productive, controllable actions that lead to high performance. The mindset is grounded in consistent effort and continuous incremental improvement rather than the rigid all-or-nothing trap of perfectionism. We're just taking little steps every day, and that is something we can do. We didn't build Rome in a day, but we laid bricks every day. So it's not about the outcome of trying to get to the finish line. It's about doing the thing, working on the process, the fundamentals. And if you're working on a team, like a sports team, you see this piece all of the time. Without the fundamentals, things fall apart. We have to work on those things every day. We can't get too high and get into the complex, higher level thought and complex strategies that we can take advantage of. Those are awesome. Those are great. But if we're losing sense of the fundamentals to do that, things fall apart and things don't go well. The key components of the process over perfection mindset. The first step is embracing deliberate practice. The focus is on intentional, structured practice aimed at improving a specific targeted skill rather than mindless repetition. Elite performers identify their weaknesses and dedicate their training to improving those specific areas with feedback from expert coaches. This relentless focus on improvement rather than avoiding mistakes is what drives genuine growth. That's another thing that we're partly doing at Premier Performance. Not only do we help people individually working with teams and individuals, we also work to give consultation to provide to coaches insights of what we're seeing. So that could be a refocus on fundamentals or getting back to the basics. It could be changing up our focus from pushing and building energy to finding a calm focus that we can use in the time of competition, whatever it might be. We also want to prioritize consistent reps over flawless performance. Instead of being paralyzed by the fear of an imperfect result, elite performers understand that mastery is built through daily focused repetitions. A musician practices scales every day, not just the concerto that they will perform. An athlete runs the same drills every practice, not just the final game. The consistent effort, often mundane and unglamorous, is the true engine of sustainable high performance. We also have to focus on failure. Redefining failure as a learning tool is a huge piece. For the perfectionist, a mistake is a personal failure. For the elite performer, a mistake is an essential piece of feedback. Each flaw in the process or performance offers a data point for how to adjust and improve in the next rep. This growth-oriented perspective removes the debilitating emotional weight from failure, turning it into a necessary step towards mastery. And then most importantly, we have to celebrate process-based wins. Elite performers build momentum by acknowledging and celebrating small process-based milestones along the way, not just the final outcome. Achieving a personal best in a practice session or successfully executing a difficult technique in training provides the motivation and positive reinforcement that perfectionists miss by fixating only on flawless end results. And we can use these things to build ourselves up, find momentum, and go find further success with what we're doing. If we're waiting for that final outcome to turn out how we want it to, and that's the only thing that can give us motivation, that is fleeting and it's going to be really hard to continue. Excellence is iterative. Version 1 is better than version none. The mindset of version 1 is better than version none is a powerful antidote to perfectionism because it reframes the relationship with work and failure. It embraces the iterative nature of excellence, prioritizing action and learning over the paralysis of aiming for a flawless initial outcome. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just start. The reason for this is it values progress over perfection. A perfectionist perspective is that the goal is a perfect final product. Failure to achieve this means the entire effort was a waste. Where the version 1 is a starting point, not an end, it's a stepping stone toward a better version 2 and beyond. The value lies in taking the first step and moving forward, not in the initial quality of the product. Think about it in your own life. How many times have there been things you've wanted to do, but you haven't started it? And a lot of it's been fear of what it could turn out as. Part of that is before I start it, if it's up here in my head, it's perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. Everything's good. So the second we start doing things and making it real, making it concrete, things can go wrong and it's no longer perfect. So sometimes we keep these things up in our head in almost a way to protect them. It also reframes failure as feedback. In the perfectionist perspective, any mistake is a personal failure, which triggers self-criticism and the fear of being found out as an imposter, that imposter syndrome. Version 1 is explicitly flawed. Mistakes and weaknesses are not personal failures, but valuable data points that inform improvements for the next iteration. This turns failure into a necessary part of the learning process. It also accelerates learning and growth. The perfectionist perspective is that it delays the start of a project indefinitely through analysis paralysis, fearing that an imperfect start will be a disaster. This prevents learning because no action is taken, and the best way to learn is by doing. On the other hand, by getting a version 1 out quickly, you get an immediate real-world feedback. This hands-on learning is far more valuable than endless planning and theorizing, and the mindset fosters resilience and a love for learning over a love of results. And on top of it, you might be surprised at how it turns out. Sometimes we're bad at predicting at how things are going to go, and we think it's going to go terribly and that everyone's going to hate it, and we might need to do it like 10 times. But in reality, what it could be is that if we put our thing out there, whatever it is, it could just work out, and you could just find success through it. It separates worth from achievement. In the perfectionist perspective, personal worth is tied to flawless outcome. This makes any perceived imperfection a threat to identity and self-esteem. With the iterative mindset, self-worth is not on the line with version 1. It's an experiment, not a final judgment. This mindset allows an individual to try new things and take creative risks without the debilitating fear of failure. The role of resilience in excellence. Adjusting, learning, and adapting after failure. Resilience is not merely the ability to bounce back from failure, but the capacity to bounce forward by adjusting, learning, and adapting after a setback. For high achievers, this is a critical skill that enables sustained excellence, preventing the burnout and stagnation caused by perfectionism. I promise you, you guys are going to fail at some point. It's going to happen. And it's not a bad thing, but we have to learn from it and grow from it, and we can't be afraid of it. Because if you're avoiding failure, you're avoiding progress too. And there are different levels of this based on what we're doing. We have kind of two separate categories with athletes alone. We have artistic perfectionists and then adaptive athletes. So the artistic perfectionists are more like figure skaters or gymnasts, while the adaptive athletes are more like fighters or quarterbacks or even linebackers. You're kind of on one end reacting or identifying what's going on and reacting to that, while on the other side, the artistic perfectionists are more about performing something, performing a routine, going through a process. So on one side, we're going to naturally have more failure. Because of being adaptive, you are going to react to things, and sometimes you get the reactions wrong. So that can happen because it is a little bit on the moment. You can prepare ahead of time best you can, but some of it will be in the moment, especially if you get hit with something brand new in that moment. There could be some failure, there could be some setbacks. We can't let that crush our whole game though. Where on the other side with figure skaters and gymnasts, when you're doing that work, especially in practice, any failure feels like a complete failure because you're trying to make it perfect. You're trying to compete in that way of perfectionism. The thing is, we want to pursue that perfectionism through excellence, not through perfectionism. And that can be a difficult mindset to kind of achieve with this stuff, but we want to keep it in mind. That's why we're pointing it out. We also got to keep this in mind because during the performance, something could go wrong, just like on the adaptive athlete side, except this side is a little harder because it comes with more emotional toll. Because we're trying to be perfect with the performance, if something goes wrong, we're going to probably freak out a little bit, even if it's just for a second internally. We have to be able to embrace that, feel that failure, and then keep going and get back on track and not let it submarine the rest of our performance and what we're doing, because that's going to lead to issues. And very rarely do you ever see anyone have a perfect routine. It does happen, and especially at the higher levels, it can happen. But we have to keep in mind that things are going to go wrong, especially as you're on that path towards that perfection, towards working past these things. We just have to do it in a way that's going to keep you going and that's sustainable and not going to burn you down. Let's talk a little about how striving for mastery instead of flawlessness leads to sustainable success. Striving for mastery leads to sustainable success because it focuses on the internal controllable process of a continuous improvement rather than the external, often unattainable ideal of flawlessness. While the quest for perfection is fueled by fear and it leads to burnout, mastery is an infinite journey that builds resilience, deeper fulfillment, and a growth-oriented mindset. For athletes, the mindset can be, you can't be perfect at your sport, but you can refine your craft endlessly. The athlete mindset exemplifies the ultimate refinement of the process over perfection paradigm. Elite athletes understand that their sport, by its very nature, can never be perfected, but their craft can be refined endlessly. This perspective allows them to focus on the controllable elements of their performance, embracing mistakes as feedback, and finding fulfillment in the journey of continuous improvement. The athlete's approach to endless refinement comes with the idea of pursuing 1% improvement. Instead of aiming for a flawless overall performance, elite athletes pursue marginal gains. The philosophy of getting just 1% better every day. This incremental approach makes mastery a manageable and sustainable endeavor, reducing the overwhelming pressure of perfectionism. Marginal gains can include refining a small movement in their technique, improving recovery through better sleep or nutrition, adjusting mental strategies for focus or resilience, and even more. Diving deeper into the 1% rule, which is about compounding improvement and how it beats impossible standards. The formula: if you improve by 1% every day for a year, the math shows you'll become nearly 37 times better. In contrast, getting 1% worse every day will diminish your progress to almost zero. The result: this shows that the small choices made on a daily basis have a profound cumulative impact. What seems like an insignificant change at the start, getting to work 5 minutes earlier, reading 10 pages of a book, or making one more sales call, builds momentum that creates vast disparities in performance over the long run. We have to keep doing the things, and we just got to do 1% better every day. Even if that's all we got, if we can just do a little bit every day, you're going to get better, and you're going to find the goals that you're wanting to reach more and more often in your life. A great example of this is Kobe Bryant. He had a relentless process mindset, and he really focused on excellence through repetition. Kobe Bryant, known for his relentless Mamba mentality, embodied a process-driven mindset that prioritized continuous improvements through repetition over the pursuit of flawless outcomes. His legendary work ethic and dedication to his craft serve as a prime example of how focusing on the journey rather than solely the destination can lead to sustainable excellence. He had a grueling training schedule, including famously starting as early as 4 a.m., which demonstrated his commitment to outworking his competition. He believed that success demanded consistent hard work and sacrifice, often unseen by others. And we talk about this all the time, about doing the work when the lights aren't on. We have to do the work when people aren't looking. We have to do more than others if we want something that others don't have. Bryant's approach emphasized an unwavering commitment to being the best version of oneself. He believed that this mindset, focused on process and trusting in hard work, was essential for achieving greatness in any field, not just basketball. He even continued on with that after basketball, and he retired on all the other things that he was working on at the time. And this can be an issue that comes about when we're young. The role of early praise and gifted child syndrome in developing perfectionism. Early praise and gifted child syndrome play a significant role in developing perfectionism by tying a child's self-worth to their performance rather than their intrinsic value. When a child is consistently praised for being smart or talented or the best, they often develop a fixed mindset where they believe their ability is an unchangeable trait. The fear of losing that praise status can lead to perfectionism and performance anxiety. To prevent perfectionism from taking root, it is crucial to praise a child's effort and process rather than their innate abilities. This approach fosters a growth mindset and builds resilience. We can focus on the effort. Instead of saying, "You're so smart," try, "I can see how hard you worked on that problem." This teaches the child that the persistence and the hard work are the key to success, not a fixed talent. We can also highlight the process. Focus on the specific behavior that led to a good outcome, such as, "I loved how you used different colors to show your thinking," or "It was great that you kept going even when it got difficult." And normalize mistakes as we go. Model imperfection by openly acknowledging and learning from your own mistakes. This helps children understand that mistakes are a normal and necessary part of the learning process. By shifting the focus from outcome-based praise to process-oriented encouragement, a child can build a healthier relationship with effort and success, laying the foundation for resilient and sustainable drive for excellence. And I know it feels like pushing forward on these things like innate abilities can be good, like "You're so smart." And I know it sounds nice, but the issue isn't so much saying those things. The issue is what happens when something shows them the opposite of that, when something goes wrong. Because if something does go wrong, if they get a bad grade, if they fail at something, it might completely crash that identity and cause a big identity crisis. And you see that a lot in a lot of different places in performance, whether that be business professionals, athletes, or anything else. Self-compassion as an antidote for perfectionism. This is science backed by Kristen Neff. Studies show that self-compassionate individuals have less fear of failure and are more motivated to learn and grow. They see mistakes as opportunities for improvement rather than a threat to their self-worth. It also boosts motivation sustainably. Contrary to the belief that being kind to oneself leads to complacency, self-compassion actually increases motivation. By not being paralyzed by fear of failure, people are more willing to take risks and persist after setbacks. The perfectionist leader versus the excellent leader. The perfectionist leader creates a culture of compliance and fear, while the excellent leader creates a culture of innovation and resilience. While the pursuit of perfection may produce high-quality work in the short term, the excellent leader's focus on continuous improvement fosters sustained success and a healthier, more engaged workforce. How perfectionism kills innovation. The fear of mistakes stifles experimentation. Perfectionism kills innovation because it fundamentally conflicts with principles required for creativity and new ideas, which are risk-taking, experimentation, and learning from mistakes. By stifling the very activities needed for innovation to flourish, Perfectionism creates a climate of fear and stagnation. With this, great leaders model vulnerability because they show that mistakes strengthen credibility. We can lead by example. If you're trying to wear a mask and pretend as though everything's okay and everything's fine, you're not going to get what you want out of it. And then it's not saying we have to open up about every struggle in our life and just reveal it to everyone all of the time. We don't have to do that either. We can find balance in it. But it's saying that if we can lead by example and really show others that this is okay, you're going to find the team being more willing to do this themselves, and that's going to lead to better results, more innovation, more creativity, more progress in whatever you guys are working on. And you guys are going to work better together, and you're going to trust each other more. So don't be afraid to leave with that vulnerability. And with that, I have a couple questions for you guys to think about to see if we can get a little more vulnerable with ourselves and with the people we're working with to find more success in the things that you're doing. So again, take out a piece of paper, make sure to write these down for yourself and try and answer them. And I do want you guys to send me the answer because I like hearing what you guys are thinking, and that helps me give you guys some tips and tools right off the bat. So based on how you answer these things and what you say to me about them, I will give you guys things you can start working on right now with it. So the first question, what standard are you chasing that no one else is holding you to? Let's reflect on what things we are giving ourselves that we don't need to give ourselves. Next question, do you fear being seen as imperfect more than you fear staying stuck? How do you feel about the idea of imperfection or failure or making a mistake? Does it haunt you or does it not really bother you? Third question, are your standards driving you or draining you? Is what you're doing sustainable? If it's not, we have to change it now. Don't wait for it to burn and fall apart and collapse. Change it now to make it sustainable and keep the things you're doing now going. And then last question, when was the last time you celebrated effort instead of outcome? Not focused on how it turned out, but the effort you put into it, even if it went bad. When's the last time you did that? Think about that. Reflect on it. So write all those things down, give it some thought, answer them honestly, and send me your answers on social media, on emails, on my website, wherever you want to. You can even text them to me, and I will give you some tools to start working on that and start shaping your future from there right off the bat. Resilient minds, premier results. That's what we're building here with the Premier Mindset. We're trying to build you guys up to reach that premier performance so you guys can be successful and reach the goals you have for yourself that you never thought you could reach. But in order to do that, recognition is the first step. We have to understand why we're doing what we're doing and what is happening before we can get to this place that we've always wanted to get to. Don't be afraid of success. Don't be afraid of the path to success. It can be difficult. It can be hard, but you all can follow it. You all can chase it, and you all can reach it. Make sure to share this episode if you found it helpful. If there's anyone in your life that you think is going to benefit from it, send it their way. Sometimes this could be the start of that path for them towards that success that they never knew they needed. So if you have anyone in mind when you're thinking about this or listening to this episode, send it their way and just see what you think. See what they think. See how it goes. And if it was helpful for you at all, leave a review. That really helps us out because we're trying to spread this to as many places as we can, get it in front of as many people as we can. So more reviews does help us get this out to more people. So if you did get something beneficial from this, make sure to let us know. Even just some feedback on things, if there are things that we could do better, we'd love to hear it from you guys. So make sure to let us know. That is very helpful for what we're trying to do. And with that, I make it a point to give you actionable tools to find success in your life. So let me know if it's helping. I love staying connected with you all. Let me know about the successes, the failures, the disappointments, the struggles. I would like hearing about these things. Even if you don't want help with it, you just want to let someone know about what's going on. I can be the place you brag to. Sometimes we don't want to share our successes and we're afraid to bring them up, or we feel like we're bragging, we're trying to be humble. Sometimes we're afraid to talk about our failures or our disappointments. Reach out to me and let me know. I want to be here as a resource for you guys. I want to help you out. And there's a lot of different ways you can reach me. You can email me at teammailer@premierperformancereno.com. My last name spelled Mahler. You can text or call me directly at 775-561-0056. You can follow us on our Instagram or TikTok, where we will post daily clips along with other things such as items connected to each podcast episode and anything outside of that, like announcements. And our Instagram and TikTok have the same name, which is premier_performance_Reno for both of those. We have our Facebook page and our LinkedIn page, same kind of thing. We're just trying to build a community to help you guys connect with each other and just give you more and more things. But those both have the same name as well, which is Premier Performance LLC. And then we have the Twitter or the X account at Premier Reno LLC. And then finally our website, which is www.premierperformancereno.com. So check all those things out, get involved, get into the community. We're going to keep on growing it, and we're going to keep on putting more and more things out. And we put out special offers on these social media accounts that you may not see anywhere else. So make sure to jump on there, get on board, and make sure you see them as they come out. We're going to keep going with these things. Next week, we're going to talk about decision making under pressure, which is a huge part of reaching elite performance with whatever you're doing, reaching these high levels of success and being a high performer, because this stuff happens all the time. So we'll dive into that, what that looks like, some strategies and tools that you can use to do that more effectively, more efficiently in your life. So give these things a shot, try them out, add them into your day. Don't be afraid of reaching out if you have any issues or problems. I'd love to help out however I can. Revisit past episodes, especially if they hit in good ways, and make sure to relearn things or refocus on certain aspects as we build on top of these things. With each episode, we're trying to build on things from the past. So if you haven't checked out other episodes, make sure to check those out. You might get some really great things. Otherwise, I hope you guys all enjoyed your week. Have a great time. Do the best you can. Put yourself out there and don't be afraid of taking these leaps of faith towards vulnerability and reaching success in your life. And if you're not even sure how to get started, let me know and we'll get started together. Either way, I'll see you guys next week. We'll keep building these things up and we'll keep going. I hope you guys have a good one. Talk soon.